Yeah.
Matt, do you need to start the recording?
Yes, it is starting now.
Thank you.
Hey, it's August 21st, and this is the Acton Select Board meeting. We don't start until 7, but it's 7 now, so we can start. And we have to wait until we have a quorum of at least 3 Select Board members, but all 5 of us are here, so we're ready to go. We start, as usual, with citizen concerns. Lisa's gotten me a new toy I'm very excited to use. This has got little red lights and green lights and yellow lights, just like a town meeting. And let's see, it's got 3 minutes on it. So we're trying out. Yes, it's going to go 1 minute left, 30 seconds left, 10 seconds left. And then it starts counting down, like up, back up again. Yeah, yeah. So let's go ahead. Anybody have citizen concerns? Resident concerns, sorry. I thought I did, but I can do that. Sure.
I'll buy it, I won't object.
Okay, we're called to order.
It's Tara from Mass Ave, and I think you mean residents' concerns, not citizens' concerns, because we're including everybody who's a resident, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So the letter of condolence and welcome to the members of Nashobah, and I just feel a little awkward welcoming a settler, welcoming the Indians to their own land. So I have concerns about that. I hope you revise that. The climate action plan update, I did not get to see that material, so I hope that you allow the public to speak since we haven't seen the materials. There's going to be some presentation.
There's no materials. It's just going to be
overall, okay.
Andrea talking. And
Right, well, I hope
perhaps
that
showing us she may be showing us the public, the Acton tracker that's been out there for a while.
Okay. Thank you. I had submitted my comments and I'll submit them again. So regarding the West Acton Citizens Library Trustees, it's my understanding that you're not going to let anybody else speak. Is that the case?
Yes, during the discussion, we want it to be a discussion between the select board members.
Thank you. And so since I have this time now, I just want to make sure that you got my mailing of the Friends of the Citizens Library legal memo. Also, it's my understanding that another lawyer has taken interest and has written in just recently that also says, I don't think the select board trustees have the authority to decide the scope of the Citizens Library Trustees authority that's provided under law. And so I hope that you make that note that before that conversation or during that conversation, so people listening can get the advantage of, or at least the equity of knowing that there is another side from what the town lawyer has said. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sahana Purohit. I'm not here for any concern, but just wanted to let the select board know that I'm here from the Acton Housing Authority as a commissioner liaison to the select board. So it'll be me and Bernice Barron. I think she'll be dialed in most of the time remotely. And I can't promise I'll be here for all the meetings, but I'll try my best to be here. And also today I see on the agenda, on the consent agenda, that you guys have given the Acton Housing Authority $24,075 for range replacements. So a huge thank you to our sustainability director, Andrea, and to all of you guys. So thank you, we really appreciate it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. There might be additional resident concerns. Matt, is there anyone online?
I do not see any hands raised, Sarah.
Great. Well, let's start in. Chair update. The only thing I have is just an explanation of the last minute changes in the agenda. Those of you who follow these things very closely will remember that this morning we put out a slight change to the agenda. The item on discussing next steps for the sewer commission analysis needs more conversation between me and the town manager and Alyssa, who's the select board member most involved in this. So we're gonna let this brew a little bit more before we come back to the select board. And this new letter that we're approving is mostly about the return after 275 years of members of the Nashobah Praying Indian Band who are now living in Acton, in Littleton. And we'll get more into the details, but that came up kind of suddenly. I think that's all I had for updates.
Thank you. I just wanted to let everyone know that the Acton Water District received a $500,000 drinking water supply protection grant toward the purchase of 549 Main Street, where the district will be operating bedrock wells to diversify Acton's water supply, increase resiliency and drought preparedness, and improve water quality. So that is super good news, a lot of money. The Health Department will be hosting a Hazardous Materials Day at the DPW Garage at 14 Forest Road on Tuesday, September 12th, from 4 to 6:30 p.m. They are not going to be sending out paper flyers in an effort to go paperless, but you can find information on the town website. The Water Resources Advisory Committee is reviewing the draft report of the Great Road Wastewater Solutions Study that was conducted by environmental engineering firm Wright Pierce. They started their discussion at their meeting last Wednesday and will continue that discussion tomorrow at 7 p.m. via Zoom, and then they will submit those comments to the town manager. The public may comment now and also when the final report is published and presented, presumably to our board here. On September 9th at 10 a.m., so Saturday, the East Acton Village Green will be the location for an event that is a dedication and ceremonial blessing of that park. Many thanks to conservation staff for their tremendous efforts and advocacy, and the Community Preservation Committee for funding the creation of the park. This park is dedicated to Mary Michaelman, Carol Hawley, and Charlotte Sagoff, who were for their environmental advocacy work in Acton. So there are informational panels about them. Funding was also sourced from their families. There's also an informational panel that was just installed featuring the Nashobah Praying Indians, which Jim just mentioned. So members of the Nashobah tribe, including Strong Bear Medicine, who just recently moved from Natick to Littleton, will hold a ceremony in full regalia with music and dance. So we invite everybody to attend if they are able. And just a couple of short announcements. The Danny's Place is having a grand opening for their new location on Sunday, September 17th at 11 a.m., the ribbon cutting ceremony. That will take place at 543 Mass Ave. And I also want to let everybody know to save the date for the second annual Diwali Fest, which will be held Sunday, October 8th at the Sargent Memorial Library in Boxborough from noon to 4:30. Food, vendors, music, dance, and that is being announced in Acton because it's a collaboration between students that are in Acton, Boxborough, and Littleton. And there were hundreds of people there last year. Great entertainment and great celebration and great food. So attend if you can.
Thank you. David? No? Fran?
Thank you for the updates, Alyssa. They're helpful. And I just wanted to put a plea out for just to, to encourage town folks to join a committee, find a committee that might be something that it piques your interest. We have so many committees that need members, additional members, and I'd be happy to walk you through the process if you reach out. And that's all for me.
Thanks, Fran. Dean?
Yeah, just one. The Community Preservation Committee is meeting tomorrow night at the Memorial Library. We will be reviewing the Community Preservation Plan. It's been circulated amongst all the members and interested parties. We've got some edits to it. We'll be deciding on it, making a vote on it, and then there'll be a formal hearing process later on in September. But it's still in flux at this point. That's it.
Great, thanks. Normally, we would now get a town manager update, but you may notice that the chair is empty. John Mangiarotti is getting well-deserved vacation and has even resisted any temptation to call in or be available online with our encouragement to just, actually take a vacation. So we will carry on without him. Next, we're going to have a presentation of the Climate Action Plan update. And normally John would be here to say, to introduce Andrea Becerra, our Sustainability Director. So I'll do that. So, and you looks like you have your team here as well. So maybe you can introduce everybody and come up and tell us about the Climate Action Plan update.
Sure. So I'll introduce ourselves and then.
You press that little button there, and then we can hear everything you say.
Let us settle down first. Oh, wait, let's get in the chair. So I'm the Sustainability Director for the town of Acton. I've seen many of you here before. I'll pass it down to Hannah and Lauren to introduce themselves as well.
I'm Hannah. I'm one of the Sustainability Fellows for this summer.
And I'm Lauren. I'm the other Sustainability Fellow for the summer, and today I started as the Environmental Analyst for the town as well.
Okay, and with that, we can get started. I may need some technical help, Lisa, to share my screen. Thank you. I'm not. Okay, I'll do that. Okay. Perfect. Here, I can join. So while that loads, I'll give you all some context. So as many of you know, the Climate Action Plan was published last year, and it was a culmination of work that started in 2021. And before that, I'll start at 2018 when the Select Board passed an environmental policy, which asked the town to set, where's the mute? Yeah, it's not giving me share settings. Here we go. Thank you. You'd think this was my first time on Zoom. Here we go. Okay. Yep. Perfect. Thank you for bearing with me. We published the Climate Action Plan last year, and a lot of the work leading up to the Climate Action Plan, most importantly, the Select Board Environmental Policy, passed in 2018, which asked the town to pass a set of goals and actions around sustainability. Thank you. And then in 2021, the special town meeting declaring a climate emergency and calling for net zero as quickly as possible with a target date of 2030. And it's important to remind everyone of the context because so much work led up to the climate action plan. And then as the environmental policy states, it asks for an annual progress update on those goals. So here we are today to give you, present the tool where folks can dive deeper into a progress update into each action found in the climate action plan. And the goal behind the Climate Action Plan Tracker is to make sure, one, just make it a tool for annual updates, but two, make it a live document that people can provide updates and input on throughout the year at any time. So for example, one resident reached out and said, hey, you should include the solar at Knox Trail that the Acton Water District has just unveiled. And so we're gonna include an update on that work. So it's an opportunity to provide updates of progress throughout the year, not just on an annual check-in. And then we will host an annual check-in with the public as well, which we already did in July. And so we'll also do that on an annual basis as well, as a way to sort of continue to collect input from the public in a more organized fashion, not just through emails and direct input on the actual tracker throughout the year. And it appears we're having some, yeah. Here we go. Zoom is sort of closed on me. Okay, so Hannah, first we'll start with Lauren. Lauren will give an overview of the greenhouse gas inventory. So we were able to update the inventory that was conducted and published in 2019. So we have an update on that today. And then Hannah will dive into the actual tracker itself so you can get a flavor for how you can navigate the tracker. So I'll pass it on to Lauren.
Hi, everyone. So this summer I've been working.
That's a good idea. Unless you want to screen.
Okay, thank you. So this summer I've been working on updating our greenhouse gas inventory. And once you enter the first main page of the tracker, you can see there's some different categories you can pick on. But under About, you have basic introduction to what the tracker is and a bit about the plan, as Andre was just explaining. And we also have some highlights from what we've found so far from the greenhouse gas inventory update. So the original update was completed through the consultant agency, and that was done using the ICLEI reporting. And this year we used the MAPC tool, which is more of a regional tool, and it relies on municipal data as well as some estimates using census data. And so it's kind of more of a high-level inventory, and it was very useful and very easy to complete with the data that we currently have. Thank you. But we are still working on updating that further and getting more specific data so that we can use the ICLEI report again so that there's kind of a clearer comparison between the original inventory and the new one. But so far, we've seen some really impressive decreases in emissions. So there was a 21% decrease across all sectors, comparing the 2019 inventory to the MAPC one, and the MAPC one was completed for 2022, so it's as recent as we could do. And stationary emissions have only decreased by about 1%, so we are hoping to really work on that number. However, we did see a 35% decrease in transportation emissions. That was very exciting for us to see, and thank you. That decrease we see is directly related to a large increase in electric vehicles in Acton. We have about 8% of residential vehicles in Acton right now are some form of either hybrid or electric, and we were able to collect that data. Thank you to Jim Snyder-Grant. We had the town data, and he provided a code and used that to kind of disaggregate that for us, so that was very helpful. Thank you. And here's just a brief overview chart showing the basic breakdown between transportation emissions, waste emissions, and stationary emissions that we've seen so far. So we can see that transportation has really shrunk. It used to be the largest category, and now we have stationary energy as the largest, so still working to reduce those. And then this chart comes from the in-progress ICLEI report that we're working on. And so currently, the largest municipal category is buildings and facilities. This is specifically for just municipal emissions, as well as the vehicle fleet. So still working on reducing those as well. But we will provide some greenhouse gas inventory updates on this page as well as we have them. And then you can also explore the rest of the categories to see kind of how those all play in. And I think, Hannah, if you want to show them how that works.
Cool. So, let's see. So if we keep scrolling down, you can see that we have a key for coming soon, in progress, and complete. We use those colors and then those symbols on the side consistently through all of the pages. And then we go through each of the 7 sections of the climate action plan to break down the strategies, the action, and then in each category's specific page, we go into the direct actions that Acton has taken on each strategy. So here we'll use buildings and housing as an example. We have our strategies listed, the actions, and then we have a status. Oh, it's not doing it.
There's a little bit of a lag. You can use your imagination.
Oh yeah, it's about to cancel out again.
It keeps shutting down the Zoom.
The here is the tables.
Yeah.
Sure, I think that would be helpful. Thank you, David. If you just go to, okay, perfect. Thank you.
For those that want to follow at home, bit.ly/Acton Tracker.
Thank you. Great. So we have it in this form, which is a smaller section of a larger PDF that you can find kind of up in that About section as well, if you prefer to just see all of the information at a glance of our progress. You'll notice that most of our actions are in progress or coming soon. And we'll go into, oh wait, sorry, I forgot that you have control of it. If you scroll down and click See More, you'll go to the specific page for that section. So we're entering buildings and housing. And if you scroll down more, each strategy, oh wait, do you mind Xing out of that one? Oh, yeah. You'll be able to scroll through and see what it means to have something be in progress or the next steps we're about to take in order for something to be deemed coming soon, as well as the final product for something that we've said has been completed. A lot of these action items are supposed to be things that we continually work on, and so hopefully this will give a good structure for data we hope to continue collecting, steps we are still, working on taking, and give a very transparent view of the work that has been done, but also all of the work that is to come. And yeah, so at the bottom of the page, there's a contact information section so that if there are any comments, questions, people willing or interested in getting involved in any of the different actions can reach out to the Sustainability Office. Is there anything I'm missing?
Yeah, the other piece is if you go to the home page, David? Or the tab. Oh yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, if you go to the description, I have it up here, but I won't be able to share my page. So I link it into the intro. Scroll down a little bit. It's in the about. It's in the last paragraph of the about. A little bit lower. You can click here at the last sentence. Yeah. So when we had our event with the public, some folks stated that they would love to just see the progress update on each action in just a few pages instead of having to dive into the details of each one. So this is a table summarizing each of those actions into a really simple format for those who don't want to get into the weeds of each one. And so we'll update this on an annual basis as well. And with that, we'd love to open it up to you all to see if you have any questions or if you have any edits. The beauty of this is that it's not a final document. It's something that we can continue to update on a regular basis.
Thanks so much. Questions or comments from board members? Alyssa?
Thank you. Thank you for the update and congratulations. Thank you and good luck back in school. I wonder if you could let us know if there's any area on the tracker where it's clear that residents can provide feedback, because I do know who sent you that feedback, and she was involved in all of the workshops and the development and review of the climate action plan itself. So I feel like somebody with that level of knowledge just knew to get in touch, and I'm wondering if there's any place on this tracker to alert people that it's a living document and here's where you get in touch if you have feedback. Not just a contact button, but specifically
Yeah.
inviting that.
Yeah, so in the actual about, the last paragraph does say, if you have questions about the tracker and/or would like to provide feedback on a particular action, please reach out to sustainability@actonma.gov. But that's about it.
Okay,
It's just sort of
that's
a
perfect.
sentence in a paragraph.
Okay,
But we
great.
actually did add that because of that feedback.
Okay,
so-
wonderful.
Yes.
And my other question was, I saw at the top of the Google Doc, last updated July 2023, and I think I saw it in another page, where are all of those last updated dates located? Like every single page, every single item, so somebody who's looking at it knows how old the data is.
Yeah, it's not in every single page.
Yeah, but we can add that. That's like an
Yeah.
automatic feature
Yeah,
from the.
yeah.
Just on the title slide of the CAP tracker, it says also last updated July 2023, and then on those tables, so just once. And that's for the whole thing, not just for each.
Yeah, but it's not for each individual, you're asking for like each individual section, not just for the.
I'm not asking for anything in particular, just wondering if it's only on the homepage or if it's on each page, which I think that's sufficient.
Yeah.
As long as
on
it's
the
easy for
homepage.
people to find.
Right.
Thank you.
David?
Thank you, and thank you for this update. I just have one quick question. There are the status percentages. What exactly are those percentages? Is that the progress we've made since 2018 on the particular goal? Or is that something else?
Yes, it's literally, if you look at the table, it's literally a breakdown of all of the actions within that strategy and then within that section, and then it just takes a percentage from each one. Like each action is worth 1 point, basically.
I see,
Out
so
of a
it's
whole.
just to say, give it back to you and see if my interpretation is correct. It's a progress of the actions that we're taking, not a progress in, say, removing carbon from the
No.
our carbon discharges into the atmosphere. Right, it's our work progress.
Exactly, that's
Got
right.
it. Thank you.
That's right, yeah.
Thank you. I was curious, what's included in the category of stationary? Is that buildings,
Yes,
structures? Yeah.
yes, that's all buildings.
Residential, town, everything?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple questions or comments. First of all, thanks for this. It's great to see. I'm really looking forward to seeing the inventory information when that's updated and it gets integrated into the tracker. Really, this is sort of related to David's question, which is that, you know, a lot of us are curious or vitally interested, maybe even in what the actual, you know, progress is in each sector. So looking forward to knowing that so that we know, you know, where to go. A question related to that was, you know, the big drop in vehicle emissions. I'm wondering if you yet have a sense of how much of that is a change in methodology from the ICLEI tracker to the MAPC tracker, and how much of it is, you know, sort of apples to apples, an actual drop.
It's a really good question. This is something that we've grappled with quite a bit because the data is a lot more accurate now than it used to be. So the vehicle data in our last inventory came from 2014. So there is also a long time between the 2014 data and the now data. I'd say the vehicle data is actually quite accurate. It's just a matter of whether or not the 2014 data was as accurate. I don't know, Lauren, if you want to add anything there.
Yeah.
Lauren is the one who really poured through all the data too.
Yeah, and I really do appreciate the work that you put in on that. It has been a little challenging. I think there are some parts of the ICLEI report that aren't reflected in the MAPC one. We're working on like employee commute is part that was included originally. So I do think there'll be a little bit of an adjustment from that. And another challenge was just kind of like how it needs to be reported. It requires vehicle miles traveled data, which wasn't included in the town data. And so the state recently came out with an updated vehicle census, which was the first one since the 2014 census. So exciting that there's that updated data now, but MAPC hasn't had the chance to kind of format it into vehicle miles traveled and also the breakdown between what categorizes a vehicle as electric versus hybrid. Sometimes it's just considered fossil fuel car versus diesel or like strong diesel, things like that. So there's so many factors and we've gone back and forth a lot of times. I think like Andrea said, it's pretty accurate now just because we do have the data directly from the town compared to the census data is a little bit of an estimate. So I'm confident with where it's at now, but I'm definitely still trying to narrow it down to make it very accurate, but definitely a challenge.
Thank you for wrestling with it. Yeah, it was a struggle back then in the original report as well. One question I had for you, Andrea, if you had any thoughts about this, because I mean, maybe this is something we need to wrestle with as a board, but I'm just curious about your thoughts. So we have so now we have the Climate Action Plan with its goals. We have select board goals, which are an annual thing. And we have, as a third theoretical set of goals, we have the town's sustainability policy, which has required us to come up with townwide environmental goals, you know, a little broader than just climate change, but some set of goals. And we haven't done that for 5 years. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how those three buckets relate to each other or should relate to each other.
Yeah, that's a great question. We haven't really ever considered doing a sustainability plan. I think there's just pieces of sustainability we can draw from different sections. So it's interesting because there might be a place in this tracker itself to maybe keep track of parallel sustainability goals, or when we do resilience planning, see how we can keep track of those as well. So there is maybe a future where we have like maybe not in this tracker itself, but like another story map, because story maps are so easy to work with and wonderful, where we can maybe combine sort of an overview of all the sustainability actions and kind of point to the various plans that are related or where that action lives. That's one way to approach it. Yeah.
Thank you, that's great. I don't know anything about the flexibility of this tool, but it's a wonderful place to look, and I'm glad that it has some flexibility to it. Another process question. What's your idea about when we review the actual actions? You know, maybe we edit them, maybe we add new actions, maybe, you know, there's obviously needs to be a process so that we continue to make progress. You know, I mean, if we got all those actions done, we still wouldn't be at our net zero emissions goal. So eventually there's going to need to be new goals, and given that it's 2023, you know, they may need to come sooner rather than later. So any thoughts about the process for updating these actions?
Yeah, so I think you're not referring to just updating the status on the action, but
Right.
maybe adding new actions?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's not really set up for that at this stage. We're sort of just updating within the action. So one option is a mid-year climate action, or not mid-year, I'm sorry, like sort of mid-decade. So like a 2025 plan. To sort of see where we are and then see if we can update the, add more actions, or sort of check in and see, you know, some actions maybe weren't structured well, and we need to sort of look at how we restructure them. So we could have another process like that in maybe 2025.
Okay, well, we'll keep talking about it. It seems like that also lines up well with the next round of the comprehensive community plan, where we're going to want to, you know, have, in the last plan, there was a whole environmental section, which I imagine, you know, it rolls from these goals, plus some possible updates. Thanks. That's all I got. I really just want to extend my appreciation again for all the work you're doing. And it's great to see, you know, climate emissions reductions actually happening.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, please stay there, because there might be comments or questions from the audience. Oh, okay, for example.
Hi, it's Tara again, and my question is about the 50 acres or so of land that's destroyed in Acton every year, and the impervious paving that's created every year, and impervious other surfaces. And so, are we tracking that since we have the data?
We are not tracking that as part of the greenhouse gas inventory, only because it's not standardized, and it's not considered as part of the, like your typical greenhouse gas inventory. That's not to say that we can't and shouldn't. We did try last year with the publishing of the Climate Action Plan to do that. So there is information on that in the actual Climate Action Plan itself, on what sort of emissions reductions come from the existing tree cover. But that's sort of the best approach we found, unless there are other approaches that we should consider. Yes.
So the Green Acton Land Use Committee is all excited about that, and they're willing to help. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Tom Beals, Willow Street. I'm curious for your numbers for reduction due to electric vehicles. Did you factor into that the charging source for the vehicle? If someone is plugging in an electric vehicle and charging, but getting their power from the non-renewable sources, then you may have just displaced the CO2 instead of reducing it or eliminating it.
So We don't get that granular. It would be really interesting to see, but it does sort of make an assumption of emissions it doesn't make an EV zero emissions. It just gives it a much lower MPG, like miles per gallon than a fossil fuel vehicle or a gas-powered vehicle. So it does give it some emissions, and those are emissions associated with the
Is that reduction factor included in your document?
So we don't describe it, but it is sort of inferred, and it is explained in the actual greenhouse gas emissions tracking, like data, like the process.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if this is included in that too, but for people charging electric vehicles in Acton, that electricity would be factored into the total electricity and the associated emissions there. And since the municipality is on 100% renewable, then that rate would be reflected for at least the municipal chargers, and then I assume the other chargers in the town would also be included in residential or commercial.
Yes, that's a really good point. If the vehicles are charging on the municipal electric vehicle chargers, then technically it is supporting 100% renewable energy, since the town has a contract for 100% renewable energy. The great news is that the grid is also increasingly cleaner, so if a vehicle isn't charging on a town electric vehicle charger or a charger that is connected with matches the grid 100%, then that grid itself is getting cleaner every year.
Yes, and a pitch for composting. And just in general, is there a place where people can make comments about other potential things we can reduce? Because sometimes, like transportation, you can't really force everybody to stop using their cars, although I'm learning in my older age to withhold comment, and I was on a list of, an environmentalist list, and they were talking about all these people going to protest, and then they were talking about their vacations, and I was thinking, and I wanted ideas on how to reduce carbon footprint. It's like, stay home. That would be one idea. So I'm wondering if there's like a place where we can put ideas of both things we can do binding, things where we actually have the power to do something, and things that are just sort of optional recommendations and suggestions. And I say that because how much more effort are we going to do in encouraging and nourishing and educating and not doing things that we have binding, because we have the ability to protect land, we have the ability to do that, and that doesn't cost any money, so not very much money anyways. And so I'm wondering whether there's calculations about potential actions and how much FTEs and the return on investment in terms of the carbon return on investment that we're engaging in with our limited resources, and how we might better use those to get there faster. Thank you so much for listening.
Dean's got a thought about that.
Yeah, so this is somewhat related. It kind of piqued my interest when you mentioned about the cars being charged on the town system. Are the town facilities and town properties all being supplied electricity by the same supplier as the Acton Choice that goes to the residents, or has the town found a different supplier?
So the town found a different supplier through a bid process, and we received a much better price. Because we have so many buildings, we were able to qualify for a much better rate. So we pay about 15 cents per kilowatt hour for 100% renewable energy. And the Acton Power Choice price is much higher.
So I guess that begs the question then is that same preferable rate going to be available to all of our residents who have, opted into the town system? Because I think one of the selling points when we first got into this was well, there's going to be a big pool of electricity that we're going to be buying. It'll be not only the town and maybe the schools, but certainly all the residents. So now if you're telling me that the town of Acton actually opted out of the system that they've encouraged all of the residents to be into, I'm not sure that's a really good look.
I was in on some of those meetings, Dean, so I can provide a partial answer. The thing about the Acton Power Choice program is that the bidders into that program have to include the fact that people are coming in and out. People move, they change their settings and all that, and that's an overhead that they have to include in their price. Whereas town of Acton or a large business can go to a vendor and say, hey, we'll have a fixed contract with you for this many years, and we're not moving anywhere. So we do get that slightly better price for the town that we can't find for residents. Although, if you are a large business, it's often better to go directly to a bidding process and get your electricity that way rather than going through Acton Power Choice.
So I think, and I'm not sure what dollar value that is involved in this. I believe the town manager at some point during one of his budget processes mentioned that we were getting preferential rates and we'd saved a bunch of money, which is great from a taxpayer point of view. But I think in the future, it would be really helpful if the town was much more transparent about the decision-making process that you apparently have gone through and the town manager has to bail out of the Acton Choice program. And I think, that might open some people's eyes. I know in the past, with my involvement with the Council on Aging, there was a lot of concern about Acton Choice, whether they were getting the best deal. And, I was trying to recite the party line that, oh yeah, this is a great deal. But apparently it's not such a great deal, and there might be ways that people could do better than with the Acton Choice program.
I think seems like it would be a really good idea to publish the kind of charts that we've used internally and sometimes bring to public presentations that show the Acton Power Choice prices over the years and the Eversource basic prices. Because we have been consistently saving residents money over what they would have paid if they'd gone with plain old Eversource. But I think what you're talking about is another layer of disclosure, which is talking about these contracts that large businesses and the town can get into, which lower the price even more. And I think it'd be a fine idea. Yeah.
I hope that you follow up with the manager on that. Mm-hmm. Certainly before we get into another solicitation process.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, could I?
Please.
Just add something else to that. So I will just note that the new prices are gonna set in December, and they will be much lower. So we went out to bid this year, and you might remember that last year we only signed a one-year contract because when we went out to bid, the prices on the electricity market skyrocketed, which was unfortunate timing. So I do receive a lot of calls from residents who have questions about the high prices and are concerned. So just a heads up that, which I let them know, that prices will go down in December substantially. So those will match more what the market rate is right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thanks so much.
Thank you.
The next item is update from the 250 Committee and announcement of logo. I think this is Dean's item.
Okay, thank you. I know that the logo was in the packet, and if somebody could put that on the screen, that would be great.
It's coming up in a minute.
So while that's loading up, I just wanted to update the board on the activities of the Acton 250 Committee. We've been meeting at least monthly. We've got at least one subcommittee that's been meeting much more frequently. We just recently approved the logo, which we'll see in a minute, which we solicited public submittals on that. I think we had 43 separate submittals that came in. It was sort of a lengthy process that we went through, and we actually combined two suggestions, and we ended up with this logo here, which there are several different color iterations of that available. Eventually, we've got a merchandising committee that's going to be looking at various commemorative items that will be available. So this is obviously a multicolor rendition of it. We also got, a black and white, and it'll get tweaked slightly just depending upon the background of the item that it's going to be portrayed on. So merchandising committee will be getting going probably in September. We hope to be able to have some commemorative items available. We're still working out exactly how the financing is going to work on that. But we think it's a great logo. We're very happy with the way it turned out. And the next important piece of information is that starting in September, we'll also be beginning some of our programming. The first is going to be in late September. We're bringing a speaker in who will be in this room here. I believe it's Bob Allison, who's a scholar, to talk about some of the events leading up to the events in April 1775, which is all part of our charge. Is the battle didn't just occur. There was a drumbeat of activities that went back 5 or 10 years prior to the revolution starting itself. And we're exploring a lot of that. So there will be a series of speakers. Right now, it looks like there'll be a different speaker or some kind of an event about every 2 months for the next year or so. We're trying to key some of these things in with some of the obvious events that people are aware of, things like the Boston Tea Party and some other activities that are taken by the British Crown against the colonists, Crown Resistance Day, and that sort of thing. So you'll be seeing more and more of it. We've really got some wind behind our sails here now. There'll be some articles probably every couple of weeks that should be going into the Action Unlimited. And like I say, we haven't started working yet on a big event, a parade or something in April 2025. We've kind of concentrated on some of the background items and information and sort of setting the stage for that. So it's been a good committee. We've been meeting once a month, and they say some subcommittees have put in huge amounts of work, especially lining up the speakers. We are going to be setting up a possibility if people wish to make donations to support the speaker program. That will be available to folks. We do have a small budget under public celebrations that we'll be using. But certainly, some of the speakers that we've been talking about are fairly expensive. And at some point, we might need some additional funding. So we're certainly going to make that a possibility if civic-minded citizens wish to make some contributions. So there it is, and hope that everybody likes it, because you're going to be seeing a lot of it for the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. I wonder if there's any questions or comments from the board about the update? My only tiny contribution here is that I verified that the cool image is in the public domain, so we're not at any legal risk of there's a lot of different images of Minutemen out there, and it looked to be one that was created a while ago and was, modified by the logo designers, but, it's a familiar image. I just want to make sure we weren't violating any copyrights.
It's based on the Minuteman statue that was cast by Samuel Chester French, that's down at the North Bridge in Concord, which was based on an understanding of what Isaac Davis himself looked like.
Yeah, I even saw some versions with the plow right there underneath his feet. I would say I also really like the way that the designers chose to take some of the elements of the logo and have them extend beyond the box. I think it gives a nice three-dimensional effect. Thanks.
This is a question for Dean. Is there going to be some sort of centralized place to view all of the events throughout the years leading up?
Yes, we hope to work something like that out, probably get something on the website, so that we've pretty well nailed down the speaker program for about the next 6 months, so we'll be adding all that in, so we'll make it available.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Dean. Now we're going to move on to the item about discussing the role of the West Acton Citizens Library Trustees. I think some of you might have come in a little late after the introduction at the beginning of the meeting, so just as a reminder, this is going to be a discussion among the select board members. We're always open to, getting comments at other times or by email, but this particular one is, the goal of this discussion is to really understand our visions for how the West Acton Citizens Library Trustees work with the library to create, and maintain of this wonderful institution. We're trying to avoid talking about, the legal details of how we get there. And we're not planning to make any decisions tonight. We're just planning to finally have a chance to hear from each other and have some discussion about the topic of, what do we want to see? And with that, I think I would like to turn it over to Alyssa, who's our liaison to the Citizens Library, to take us through this process.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you to all of the board members in advance for having this discussion. I think that it's important to first off acknowledge that there are many different opinions on the issue. Also acknowledging that it's taken a tremendous emotional toll on officials, staff, trustees. I would like to express great gratitude to the staff, the Memorial Library staff, for keeping the Citizens Library open following the resignation of the library manager right at the beginning of the summer. So they've been staffing the library, offering programming, and especially the library director, Maria Palacio, and the assistant director, Carrie, I can't remember her last name, and Mary Cadis have been supporting the trustees as they have been meeting. The trustees have requested a lot of information and data, which the staff have provided to them so that they can make informed decisions. So I just want to put that out there, that the acknowledgement and the appreciation. Also for the resources that have been expended, both in time and dollars over the years. So I know that it's challenging to have the patience to revisit the process, but I think that it's a necessary thing that we do out of respect for the people, which would be the patrons who visit the library, as well as the staff that work at the library and the trustees. Also respect for the law, and probably most especially respect for process, because we need a good process. So I just wanted to let everybody know that since becoming a select board member and the liaison to both the Memorial Library Board of Trustees and the Citizens Library Board of Trustees, I have had many conversations and reviewed many documents, and my opinion is still evolving. I have not, firmed that up. I've reviewed legal opinions and memos, meeting minutes of both Memorial trustees and Citizens trustees, the long-range plan that was developed by the Memorial Library trustees and staff, the Citizens Library Incorporation documents, town annual reports, the town charter and bylaws, all sorts of documents reviewed. And also had conversations with present and former trustees, present and former staff, trustees in other towns, library directors in other towns. So I'm really trying to dig deep into understanding this. So right now, where I am in this moment, which is different than the place that I was in yesterday, last month, just 2 hours ago, is that my vision is that this board allows the discussion that just begun with the Citizens Library trustees to continue. So I did fill out the table with check marks over each authority item and where I thought the Citizens Library trustees should fall. But rather than sharing that, I would like to ask that this board steps back and lets that process continue without undue influence from our board. So that's where I am now. So the Citizens Library trustees have had only one conversation amongst themselves. It was a really great conversation, in my opinion. They went through each of the items in that table one by one. They listened to one another, made sure that each one of them had an opportunity to speak on each. They respectfully disagreed on some of the items, agreed on others. So that's what I expect is the first of several discussions that will continue to happen. They are also participating in the long-range planning process that the Memorial trustees and staff have started for the next 5 years. So they have one trustee who is a representative and will be attending the meeting, but the communication will go back and forth. So I think it's important for that process to continue. I think that another very, very important piece is that through this process, we get a lot of public input. We engage in public education and get public buy-in so that whatever structural solution comes out of this process, we'll pass at town meeting. So I think that it's really important to engage the public because libraries exist to serve the public, right? So the strategic planning and the decisions that are made come from the needs and the desires of the public. So I think it's really important to have public input. I do think that the legal opinion that was provided prepared for the Friends of the Citizen Library, which cites case law, is a very compelling document. The town charter outlines, which officials are elected either at the ballot or at town meeting, that elected officials have authority that's granted by other documents, whether it's the general laws or the Commonwealth Constitution, the town bylaws, et cetera. The original Citizens Library Constitution sets forth that the library be controlled by the people, again, referring to my insistence that there be a lot of public input. The gift that happened at the town meeting in 1962 required that the original purposes of the West Acton Citizens Library Association be carried out. So I think that it's really important for this structural solution to be true to that constitution because I don't think that that was negated that might be a question for council, but I don't think that that constitution was negated when the gift was accepted by the town in 62. Mass General Laws provides that a library gifted to a town must be, quote, administered by the board in accordance with the provisions of such gift. So we need to, again, be in alignment with the gift, the town meeting article, the transfer of deed. And I keep asking myself whether it's more plausible that for the last 60 years, this board has been exercising authority that they didn't legitimately have, or that they did have this authority and maybe exercised it in different ways depending on who was in those roles, their knowledge and experience, their effectiveness. And it just seems to me that it makes sense that it's more likely that they had this authority and that we need to put a structural, legal, something in place so that that ambiguity that so many people see is resolved moving forward, no matter who is in the role on this board, who is in the role of town manager, who's in the role of library director, or trustees. And I have, ideas about next steps and questions that I think that we need to answer, but first I think that we should hear from the rest of you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Next steps would be a good thing to conclude our conversation with, but first I'd like to, offer any of the board members, some minutes to say, things they discovered after filling out this questionnaire or while filling out this questionnaire, what their vision is of the Citizens Library Trustees, wherever. I want to listen to everybody. So who would like to go next? Dean.
So, and thank you. I think the chart did a great job of focusing some of our thoughts on these. And, respecting your request that we not delve into it deeply, there is one item in particular, it's actually the last item on the spreadsheet, the duties of review of trustee performance. And frankly, I'm puzzled and a little troubled by that, in light of the fact that the trustees, however we might feel about them, past, present, and future, are elected officials. And I'm a little troubled by the idea that, we have an official document where we're posing the possibility that certain members of the trustees could write up a document critiquing the performance of other trustees. And, taken to its logical conclusion, they are not the only elected bodies in town. We could have a situation where the select board could decide, okay, now we're going to critique the performance of all of our colleagues here on the board. And I won't comment on the other items on the spreadsheet here, but I really question whether that is an appropriate item to even consider at this point. In light of the fact, admittedly, it's usually our elections for library trustees, and indeed our elections for select board members are not usually hotly contested. But there is an election process by which, if folks feel that performance is not optimum, they can opt for running a different candidate. So I really have some problems with that one. The rest of it, I'm sure that each one of us who filled it out, as I did, our numbers, our little checks are going to be all over the place. A couple of my observations from working closely with the previous library director at the West Acton Library and actually serving as a trustee, some of the items of business that the attorney, the outside attorney, cited as things that, oh, these are things that the library trustees always did. That was not my experience. I think that the attorney got a very skewed view of some of the duties and some of the activities of the library trustees. And I would just say that from my involvement as a fellow staff member and later as a trustee and observing the library for probably 10 or 15 years, a lot of that information, frankly, is inaccurate. So I think that's something that at some point we could have a longer discussion about, but a lot of that stuff just didn't happen. I think this is in the letter from Attorney Berman. Yeah. I think my other observation is that, I've said this repeatedly, is I really definitely think that we need to have a library presence in West Acton, and I hope what comes out of this, we still end up with a library presence in West Acton. I think it's just important that it be structured in such a way that it be sustainable from the point of view of finances and staffing. And what we had going on there for a number of years was not sustainable from the point of view of staffing. It did not provide good access to the public because we had one person that worked part-time and was not always available. And then we were relying on volunteers to do quite a bit of the rest of it. And I don't think that's a sustainable model. People need reliability, that they have some reasonable expectation that the building is actually going to be open when they show up there. And when that didn't happen, obviously people got discouraged and didn't participate in it. And I think that's the absolute opposite of what we want to see there. So I think it's important that however we come out of this, that we end up with a sustainable model that is financially prudent and that has some reasonable expectations of staffing and providing staffing and supervision. In my tenure as a library trustee at the West Acton Library, we had a really good library director who basically was a self-starter. And the trustees could take sort of a back seat to a lot of things because he knew the work was getting done. But you're not always that lucky when you bring in employees. So I think it's really important that anything we have there is supported by a larger organization. And having an elected board of trustees, just as we as select board members do not directly interact with town staff as far as directing their day-to-day activities, we rely upon a professional manager. We don't reach down and introduce ourselves into people's offices and start checking what their books are and looking in their desk drawers and that sort of thing. That's not appropriate for select board members. We don't do that here at Town Hall. We rely upon a professional manager to do that. So I think it's important, again, with any kind of a structure that we have ongoing, that we have a cadre of professional librarians that can supervise this, not only from a library operations point of view, but from an employee point of view as well. So just my initial thoughts. It's truly a Gordian knot that you're trying to untie here. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Next, David?
Thank you. One of the things I think that we have to start with is what is this library? And it seems to me that there are three kind of choices. It's an incorporated Massachusetts public library. It's an association, and that's what that Neil Berman memo says, or it's a branch of the Acton Memorial Library. Well, we know it's not an incorporated Massachusetts public library because the state has no record of it. So it doesn't meet the definition. We also. So it's not a Massachusetts public library because it's not separately incorporated as one. Is that me or you? Is it me?
I think it's you, but I'll make sure I'm quiet too.
It could be an association, as Mr. Berman's mail says, but that association is long defunct. It has no directors, it has no presence, it has nothing. And so if we were to turn the library over to an association, we'd have to find that association and they would have to make a case that they ran the library. Or it's a branch of the Acton Memorial Library. The fact is that this has been managed as a branch of the Acton Memorial Library for almost 100 years. There are town records going back to materials being shared from the Acton Memorial Libraries into West and South Acton almost 100 years ago. There used to be a South Acton library. There's no longer a South Acton library. And in fact, the association was not, as Dean alludes to, was not viable as a financial entity. So there is documentation all over the place that calls this the West Branch of the library. And I'll come, well, maybe I'll do that now. So, people refer to the articles in the 1962 Warrant and Town Report as being a reason why it's not a branch. But in fact, those articles and the town report are not haphazard or confusing. Every place that they refer to the property, they refer to the Citizens Library Association of West Acton. So the property is always referred to as the association. The library is always referred to as the West Branch of the Acton Memorial Library. I'll come back to that because Attorney Berman says that the library and the building are separate, and I think that's absolutely true. The library is referred to as, again, as the Citizens Library Association of West Acton, and the building is referred to as the Citizens Library Association of West Acton, and the library is always referred to as the West Branch of the Acton Memorial Library. And in fact, it's actually referred to as the West Branch of the Acton Memorial Library in other places in that town report that have, that.
Yeah, we know, yeah, it's an odd beeping. It'd be good to resolve that.
Claire and the suffragettes ghosts.
I thought.
Seems like Lisa has disappeared in an attempt to figure out what the odd little beeping is.
No, it's the thing you push to go through the door.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, gotcha. Oh, okay.
Do you want me to stop?
Well, it's hard for me to focus on what you're saying, but here, let's take a person to go out there and see what they can do. What the hey? Yeah, let's take a brief pause.
Let's get the former facilities manager.
Yeah, we have a former facilities manager here as well who could take a look at the beep and go, oh, okay. Oh, yay. Okay, thank you. Whatever magic made that stop. Oh, well, briefly.
One more.
Yeah. That was its last cry. No? I'm sorry that those of you in TV land can't see the full action here, but basically the door going into 204 has been, its security system is complaining to us loudly. And Lisa is attempting to find the magic position at which it will not make noises. And sometimes she finds it, and sometimes she doesn't. Ooh. That might be as good as we're going to get. So why don't we struggle forward? It does seem that there's no bomb that's going to go off, no alarm that's going to get any louder. So let's go ahead. Let's focus back on David. What else you got, David?
So the articles in the 1962 warrant, they consistently refer to the building as the Citizens Library Association of West Acton and the library as the West Branch of the Acton Memorial Library. And there's other documentation, including in that document of, for example, the insurance committee referring to it as the West Branch of the Acton Memorial Library. And the fact of the matter is, it has been the West Branch of the Acton Memorial Library for a very long time. And it predates 62, right? And so nothing really changed in 62. The library stayed the same. The memo from the attorney, I agree with Dean, has lots of errors in it, right? He concludes that there were two, kind of, as I understand it, that there might have been two libraries in that building because it says that part of the building was used for the library. Well, that's not correct. The correct thing is that there was a woman who resided in that building at the time, and she was allowed to stay there. And so that isn't a legal reason why it is an association. So I think he's absolutely correct that the library and the building are different things, but if it's the association, then we have a big problem, right? And we would have to back up, find this association, or recreate it, make the library belong to them. That's a big deal. You know, I think that the only reasonable thing is the thing that it's been for nearly 100 years, is that it's the West Branch of the Acton Memorial Library. And I don't quite understand the reasons to not do that. For all this time, the library has been run by staff with input from the trustees, right? And that kind of makes sense to me, but and I think we want a professionally staffed library, and we want a library that's open to all patrons and a benefit to all patrons. So, and I don't understand the vehemence against it being a branch of the Acton Memorial Library. Finally, I know that I guess I had kind of expected, based on what was in the packet and stuff, that we were going to be going through these points one by one today. I guess we're not doing that.
Any of those points that you want to talk about would be great to hear.
Well, I mean, I could go through all my things for all of them if anybody's interested, but maybe I'll stop here and I'll come back if someone's interested. But a number of the things in that list there aren't degrees of freedom based on laws or the charter, right? So we could choose for them to be one way. They can't be that way, right? So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, David. So we got me and Fran. Can we maybe hear from the two of us before you?
I was going to clarify, since both Dean and... I just wanted to clarify something, since both Dean and David asked about the specific items that were in that table.
Okay, I think we can still wait, because we'll have a general conversation afterwards with questions back and forth and clarifications. Fran, you got something you want to say, or?
Don't know if I can add anything, but I too found this helpful, just to think about different, categories. I left the last one completely blank because it completely confused me. But I too have been really back and forth like Alyssa, and I may feel one way, you know, sometime, another way, another time. But I think it's clear to me that the history of the building of what it was is great. It's always going to have the culture that it has. I feel like we need to move forward from today, and I just see it as a branch of the library. I think it makes the most sense. I think it's been budgeted in the town budget. And it's been staffed by library staff. And I think the trustees can be separate. As I said before in another meeting, we can have a set of trustees for the Citizens Library and trustees of AML. I think that's clean and makes the most sense to me, but that's my opinion, in a body of 5. So that's really what I have to say.
Thanks, Fran. So what I discovered as I went through this is that a few that I felt most clearly belonged to some set of trustees, the Citizens Library trustees. They were safeguarding the historic look and feel of the building, outreach to the community, collecting public feedback, and fundraising to replenish the gift fund. Those all felt really clearly doable also by a 3-person trustee board. When I looked at some of the others that I thought were, going to be important,
Your list was again?
Sure, they're together in this chart. Fundraising to replenish the gift fund, outreach to community, collect public feedback, and safeguard historic look and feel of the building. They felt like, to me, the most clearly in the purview of that set of trustees. There were a lot of other items on here that I thought they should be involved in, either reviewing or approving or giving feedback on. But those are the 3 that felt at the heart of things for me. Some of the others felt also very important, but I rated them a little differently because I thought, I think either the trustees need to be beefed up in some way, like to be a 5-person body so that they can actually function in between meetings. I mean, right now, with a three-person set of trustees, 2 of them can't even talk to each other outside of a meeting. So it's very slow. It's very hard for them to, be a body that deals with complex things that have a, time pressure to them because they meet and then they have to not talk to each other for a month. So in the back of my head, I was thinking, well, maybe there's a 5-person trustees, or sometimes in my head, I thought, what if we changed the original act that created amended the original act that created the Memorial Library and defined a role for a set of those library trustees to be particularly focused on the Citizens Library. And, presumably expanding the Memorial Library Board so that the existing trustees would be, naturally in line for being elected to these new spots. So I thought of that because then you have a much larger body of people that could help each other out and learn from each other, provide backup for each other. So I'm not clear if that makes sense or not, but it's something that's been in the back of my head. Somehow to beef up the ability of the trustees to get things done, either by increasing the board or by combining it in some effective way with the Memorial Library trustees to create a body of library trustees. So that would be things like, working with the budget, being involved, participating in the, hiring and evaluation of the library manager, things like that, maybe right now a trustee could be involved in, but it's hard for them to be effective at that when there's only 3 trustees. I think a lot of the other items, they should be involved in. And depending on the ability, the functionality of the board, they could even be in charge of. But I think that depends on the ability of the trustees to take this stuff on. What else came out to me here? Well, definitely, library policies and procedures was an interesting one for me. It seems reasonable to me that there are a bunch of policies that apply to both libraries and a bunch of policies that are unique to each library. I don't know enough about the details of policies to know which are which, but it's clearly, a tiny little library has different policies than a very large library. And that the Citizens Library trustees should be intimately involved in reviewing and I think approving policies for the Citizens Library, if they have the capability to do that. I think that was the main thing. And my thought on this, the general, historical situation is, it seems like there's plenty of ambiguity in there. To me, I want us to have an agreed-on sense of what we want, and then we can do the work of figuring out what legal changes are necessary to make that true. That, given us and the trustees and town meeting working together, there's almost none of this stuff we can't change if we have a common vision. So it could be now that there's questions and comments, and I know, Alyssa, you noted that you had some sort of starting off, you had some responses to what people said.
Not really a response, well, I guess it is a response. So the question about the items that were on the table, specifically the final item, I just wanted to explain the process by which that table was developed and intended to be used tonight. So Jim actually created the list of responsibilities and some categories, sent it to me, and I reviewed trustee duties from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners website, because it not the website, the handbook, because it very clearly states what the trustees are responsible for, what the staff is, well, director specifically, and what they do together. So I just, from that list, added several items just to get us thinking, not suggesting that any particular item be included, and I can understand completely why you both think that that might not be something that we should even entertain. But that's where those items came from, and I also added several categories for other types of levels of responsibility. I guess we might hop around and go back and forth as we respond.
It could be that people heard things from each other that they had questions about or had responses to. Yeah, great.
Just one more comment. I also, safeguarding the historic look and feel of the building and safeguarding operational, functional culture of the Citizens Library. Those two I was confused by. The building's in the historic district, and it's owned by the town, right? So it is a town-owned building, and I know that I've said that here before. So the historic look will never, I don't think will change. So I don't know. And the culture, I think the culture will be as it always is. I mean, it's such a different feel. It's in West Acton. It's so much smaller. It has a different visitor base. So I just knocked those off my list. I tended to, I did this quickly, purposefully, because I realized things that I checked matched up with the way that I understand the library to function as a branch, I'm sorry. And having trustees just have duties as the AML trustees have. Maybe maintaining the fund. Historically, that's what they've done. Fundraising, outreach to the community, tasks like that.
David?
Thank you. So you mentioned about changing the structure of AML. I just want to point out that AML is a separately incorporated entity from the town. There's nothing the town can do to change that. If they want to change their incorporation, they could do that. But we can't do that. This board cannot do that. Town meeting cannot do that. The historic nature of the building, I agree with Fran, that has nothing to do with these trustees. They have no involvement with it at all. In fact, the library trustees at AML have nothing to do with the exterior of their building either. It's the town's building. They can do what they want within this exterior of the building, which is what HDC is involved with, the town can maintain that building as they wish within any permitting limits from any boards and committees that might be affected, whether it's CONSCOM or HDC or anything else. I think that there's no involvement there. As far as fundraising goes, and I'm sorry to disagree with you on all these things, town entities have limited ability to fundraise. This board can accept donations on behalf of the town. A town entity cannot go out and solicit donations under most circumstances. So that's why the Friends of Acton Libraries exists. So the Friends of Acton Libraries, you can donate to them. You could make a donation to the town, but the library cannot ask you for a donation, right? And so we'd have to get counsel to really tell us exactly under what circumstances that could happen. But as I understand it, the fundraising has to be done by a separate entity, and it's uncouth to have the trustees involved in that, right? Again, the library trustees at the main library do not engage in fundraising unless they do, maybe have an event with the Friends of or something like that. So this is what I meant earlier, that many of these things are restricted by law or charter. And I'm going to just go through mine so people touched on it. As far as the selection of materials for circulation, I think the trustees should have no involvement. The main library trustees don't have involvement in that. And it politicizes the selection of materials, which I think should not be the case. Library policies and procedures, I guess, again, I have a difference from you. I think the library policy and procedures should be the same across our library system. And the main trustees are tasked with doing that. I think they should continue to do that. Trustee bylaws, the Citizens Library cannot impose bylaws on anybody else. They are not incorporated entity to do that in the state of Massachusetts. They can make bylaws for their own operation, so they can say that, on odd months, we always meet at a circular table in the library. They can do that kind of thing for how they operate, but they cannot impose bylaws on others. The main library can, because it's incorporated as a Massachusetts public library. We can, town meeting can, but the Citizens Library cannot. Library programming, I think the trustees and the citizens trustees should be able to recommend programming, but programming is really a staff operation and is done to be consistent with staff, especially for reasons of accessibility. Programs that are offered in the West Acton branch are also offered in the main library for accessibility. Obviously, these trustees manage the gift fund and report on the gift fund. That's completely in their domain. Fundraising, as I mentioned, I don't think that they can have involvement in. We can double check with council. Outreach to the community, that's great. Safeguard the historic look and feel of the building. I believe the exterior of the building they have no involvement in. Safeguard the functional character of the Citizens Library branch. I actually, the functional culture, that worries me a little bit as a term. It almost sounds dog whistle-esque, so I'm a little concerned about that. I don't know exactly what that means, what people would say is their culture. So I'm a little worried about that, frankly. Improve the accessibility of library and its space. I think that they don't have any involvement there. It's that's the facility. The town does that. I actually think, frankly, it's possible to make that building accessible without ruining its historic character. I mean, obviously, we'd have to work with the HDC to do that, but it can't happen until these things are settled with the library, right? But I would like to see it become an accessible building, and I think that's frankly possible. There are exceptions in accessibility regulations when you have an historic building. The budget, they don't have any involvement in. Budget advocacy, sure, you know, that makes sense. Define the vision and mission of the Citizens Branch Library, that's, you know, as a recommend, that's fine. Long-range plan, they can recommend anything there. The hiring and evaluation of the Director of Libraries, there's no involvement there for them. That's done between the town manager and the AML trustees. The hiring and evaluation of the Citizens Library manager, local manager, they can comment on that. That makes sense to me. Obviously, they notify us of any trustee vacancies. And I also didn't for the last one, I just said, I'm not sure what that means.
The conversation I was hoping we were going to have. Dean?
Yeah, just as a follow-up on a couple of David's points. And I was disturbed by the discussion about, you know, protecting the culture of the library. That was a discussion that occurred prior to town meeting at a library trustees meeting, and, you know, we need to preserve the culture of what the library was like in 1962. Well, let me tell you about what the culture of the library probably was in 1962, being somebody who was 12 years old and hanging around in West Acton at the time. West Acton at the time was primarily white, Christian, and working class. We've moved on from that. And I think the value of being more closely affiliated with the Acton Memorial Library is we know that the Memorial Library has a larger pool that they're dealing with. They have diversified their staff, they have diversified their collection. They understand that they're part of a larger town, which is not West Acton in 1962. So I'm not sure I would have used the term dog whistle, but I think, you know, David, you're probably getting pretty close to being right. It could be interpreted that way. And I think it's important that we understand that Acton is not the same as it was in 1962, and West Acton is not the same as it was in 62. So we really have to move on from that. We're not trying to protect, not that it was a bad town, it's just it was a different town 60 years ago. You know, as far as the exterior of the building, I agree wholeheartedly with Fran. Obviously, the building was within the historic district. You can't change anything on the outside of that building without going through a really lengthy process. The renovations that were done to expand the library use inside the building itself, and all of the other work as far as redoing the windows, all the historic preservation work that was done on the outside of the building, and a lot of the work done on the inside of the building, was almost entirely funded by historic preservation funds from community preservation. And it was primarily staff initiated. Certainly, as municipal properties director at the time, working with the library director at the time, we presented these things to the library trustees as they existed then and told them what was going ahead. But frankly, the trustees were not directly involved in that, and that's one of the issues I had with the attorney's letter. You know, it is a town-owned building. I don't think anybody is debating that. So I really, although certainly I like the idea the trustees are concerned about what the building's going to look like, but I think, you know, as far as direct involvement and getting things done, these things really are going to have to get done by town staff, dealing with the proper authority, whether it's the Historical Commission, potentially Zoning Board of Appeals, ADA folks, Architectural Access Board, whatever. So certainly they should be involved in it, but it's not like they're going to be the initiators of this kind of work. And hopefully, if it comes to a situation of doing some major project down there, hopefully the trustees would be advocates for it. But as far as the real down and dirty work there, it's going to be done primarily by town staff and contractors. That's all I have at this point. Thank you.
Thanks. I'd add a little bit at this point. I think it's maybe a question for David. So two parts. One is that we have a director of the Acton Memorial Library now. I think that's her title. But
She's the director of Acton Libraries.
Okay, director of Acton Libraries. So that would imply to me that there is a role for a member of the Memorial Library trustees to be involved in, you know, either reviewing candidates or interviewing the last round candidates, just as there is a role for the Memorial Library trustees, since this is now a director of the libraries. So I wanted to get your reaction to that, because that's sort of it's a shift, right? It's a new title for her?
So, again, the incorporated Acton Memorial Library, as part of its incorporation, reviews the choice and approves the choice of the by the town manager of the library director, right? So, you know, I think we should not. The Citizens Branch Library is a teeny small piece of the main library. And that doesn't, I don't think, entitle those trustees who are selected by town meeting and not even selected in a way that Massachusetts Public Library trustees are selected, to participate in that process. I do think they should participate in the process of the local manager. That's just my opinion. Again, and this is part of the incorporated Acton Memorial Library. I mean, if we want to have an informal thing, I'm okay with that, right? But it's not a defined role.
Similar question about policies. If there are policies that apply to both libraries, it would seem like representatives from both libraries should be involved in that. I see how we're doing this with the long-range planning committee, that we have now a representative from the Citizens Library on that group that's working on the long-range plan. It seems like there would be a reasonable similar thing for policies.
I think that there is a member of the Citizens Branch Library trustees on the policies committee.
Great.
Right, and and they were invited by the AML trustees to do that. And so that kind of crosses is good.
Yeah, thank you. That's all I had at this time. Other follow-ups? Alyssa?
So I just want to express that I'm a little disappointed that this discussion has devolved into specific duties. Not that you need to agree to what I've requested, I'm absolutely understanding that this is a 5-person board. But what I had hoped would not happen was a very detailed discussion of each individual item that would then have undue influence on the Citizens Library Trustees discussion that they're currently engaged in. I was hoping that we could step back a little bit and allow that process to unfold with the Citizens Library Trustees. And I'm assuming that eventually they're going to bring staff into that as well. Their first discussion, they only had input from town council to answer a couple of questions. And at one point, the town manager answered one of their questions. So I think the first thing that caught my ear was the mention by you, David, about the difficulty in finding this association because this association doesn't exist any longer. And I think that I don't see finding the association as something that's necessary because the deed that was transferred specified that the original purposes of the association would be served, right, by the new board of trustees that was created with that warrant article. So I don't see that as a challenge for us. I'm really uncomfortable with the they can, they can't, there is involvement there is no involvement there, because I think that is something that has yet to be determined. We have different legal opinions on this, and so I think if instead we phrase it as, I'd like to see involvement in this, or I don't think that involvement in that is appropriate, rather than a definitive statement about what is and isn't, because I don't think that's for this board to decide. And in terms of the culture of the library being preserved, that doesn't have anything to do with demographics or a particular point in time. So, obviously a small phrase listing an item is really difficult to convey the meaning behind that. So instead I would offer a story, I guess, to explain that the culture that so many people who use the library, who are trustees at that library, who are former trustees at that library, are concerned about the culture of the library and the feel and the services that are provided and the personalization of that. So they're not stuck in 1962 with a non-diverse demographic that they're serving. Long before I was even born, probably, they have been meeting the needs of the people that use the library. It's located in West Acton Village, so the people that are coming to the library, most of them are walking there or biking there, live, either they're walking through the woods or they're walking down the sidewalks. They live fairly close. Obviously, anybody, anywhere in town can drive there if it's not a walkable or bikeable distance for them. But, there were efforts that were made, not only by staff, but also by trustees to diversify the collection to meet the needs of immigrant residents who were moving in, to establish policies and accessibility beyond physical accessibility, but accessibility to programs and resources. I mean, they had teen volunteers that were, delivering books to homebound patrons. They allowed low-income patrons to come in and, use the photocopier in order to print out the materials that they needed to update their annual housing applications. So I think that's the culture, is that personalized service that meets the needs of the patrons in a very special way. So, the story that I can tell is that, I use Memorial Library primarily, exclusively now. But when my oldest was 2 years old, we went to the Citizens Library for tot time. Maybe she was 3. So when we walked into that library for tot time, Annette said, "Hi, Sylvia," right? She knew all of the kids by name. You go in there and it's a small space. You feel like you're in a living room because you're in a little house. There's natural life. And that is a really special environment that people are wanting to preserve. And I have absolute confidence that whatever role the Citizens Library trustees settle on, and whatever staff is in there, that is possible, that we can preserve that. I think that just needs to be part of the conversation. Story time at the Memorial Library did not work for my child. We went to Citizens because it was natural light, not a large group of people, a small space. We had a relationship with the person doing story time. It was not, overwhelming and loud. And I think that applies across all of the ages, right? No matter whether it's a family with elementary school children or a teenager or an older person or a senior citizen, when they go in there, they might, have that feeling of, I'm getting, treated in a very special way. I might be the only person in the library for a while because they don't have the foot traffic that the Memorial Library does. So I definitely want to get away from that idea that we're trying to, freeze something in time and not be inclusive, because it's actually exactly the opposite.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We could transition on to a brief conversation about next steps, unless there's more that people want to say back and forth. So one thing about next steps, in response to your concern, Alyssa, I don't see any way around that, since where we want to head is an agreement, that we're gonna get opinions from the board and board members about how to proceed. I know it'd be nice to let the library trustees do all that on their own, and I think they're gonna have to work on a lot of the details, especially as staff gets involved. But yeah, we're gonna have opinions, and we need to know where the tendency of the board is in order to know if the trustees are heading in a direction that will, make its way to town meeting successfully. So I don't think there's no getting past some of the, bumps and scrapes of, having different opinions. Another comment about next steps. One thing we talked about before was, after the trustees had at least another discussion, maybe more, I don't know, of having a smaller working group, Memorial Library trustee representatives, CL Library trustees, staff, maybe a select board member, I don't know. But some small group that can take what they've heard from all these different groups and, comes up with something coherent that fits for a lot of these groups. And I wonder if that's still a direction that the board is comfortable with. Is that, because that's one possible way we could proceed.
So I'm sorry, I differ in one major case. This board does decide, right? We decide what to bring to town meeting. That is our role, right? If whatever the 5 of us want to write in the warrant to bring to town meeting, that's what goes to town meeting. And in no case, sometimes we allow advisory committees to suggest a change to their own charge. But no board or committee or set of trustees or anything gets to decide their own role. We don't get to decide our own role. Our role is defined in the town charter, right? We don't get to say, now we have more powers or now we have less. And in the case of the citizens trustees, at least right now, unless we decide that they are an association separate from the town, or in case they incorporate, someone takes the work to incorporate themselves as a Massachusetts Public Library, they're under the bylaws of the town, right? And so we do decide, right? And, we have to write out what we think, and town meeting will either pass it or not pass it. Sure.
Okay, so I understand that it's the select board's warrant. That is not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting at this point in time that we step back and allow that process to continue for the time that it needs to. Because whatever we bring to town meeting, if we have any hope of it passing, it needs to have everybody's buy-in, or at least whatever majority, right? We need to have the trustees' input, we need to have the staff input, we need to have the public input, and I just wanted to express my disappointment that today we felt the need to not, just have an overall general view. I didn't want to get into the each individual item and make a proclamation that this is or this isn't one of their authorities, because I wanted it to happen in due time with the trustees. So yes, we will be the board that brings something to town meeting in our warrant, but I hope that that we can allow whatever time is necessary for the process to play out. And in terms of the working group, I think that's something that I'm in support of, with the entities that you mentioned, memorial trustees, citizens trustees, staff, select board, the public, maybe the friends of the Acton libraries can have a representative there. But I do think that the working group should be formed once the Citizens Library trustees have their second and possibly third discussion, because they've only had one discussion on this topic.
Thanks. Other thoughts on next steps? Fran?
So as far as bringing, being on the warrant to town meeting, it would be somewhat similar to last town meeting, right? Moving forward with a bylaw, is that what it is?
That's one possibility. And I think Jim outlined a few more, and David even more. An amendment to the special act and an expansion of the board. And, just before anybody gets really freaked out about that idea, I only printed up one page because Acton is right at the top, but obviously there are hundreds of libraries in the Commonwealth. But some of these boards have 10, 12, 15 trustees. I'm not suggesting that, but I just, don't freak out about the idea of expanding the board. So I don't know what will be the structural solution. I think that we need to find it. But as I said at the very beginning, the process is of utmost importance. Right? We didn't respect the process and allow it enough time. Although a lot of people have been working on it for a long time, I think that we brought something to town, well, I know we brought something to town meeting that was not acceptable because it was postponed indefinitely. And I don't want that to happen again, because then we're gonna do this all again next year, and I do not want that. And I also I think that all of us, not only this board, but staff and trustees of both libraries don't want this to end up in court with a judge determining what's legal. And, that is a possibility with these differing legal opinions with good points and not so good points in both, maybe.
And the library, the Citizens Library is still functioning under the town, it's still functioning and doing its day-to-day. And I apologize, but this list was so inviting to get into the nitty-gritty. Sorry.
No apology necessary. And yes, that's what I suggested at the beginning, that we go through this process while we maintain the status quo of operation, because I think that it is working.
So I'd like to make a couple of things. First of all, this process was started without any concurrence by the board. Usually when we start a process, the 5 of us vote to assign people to go to. This process was started without concurrence by the board. So, and that's fine, but I think it's hard to complain now that you didn't have concurrence from the board. Also, I tried to, with the things that I use the hard words like can't, I tried very judiciously to only did that when I think it's against the town's charter or against the law, as I understand it, right? So I pointed out those things. I wasn't trying it doesn't make any sense to me to discuss those things too much, because I think there are hard, barriers to that, right? We should discuss the things where there are not those hard barriers. And finally, I think one of the reasons we're in this predicament is that we did not have this discussion last year like this, right? If we had, as a board, discussed the pros and cons openly, I think we would have been in better shape. But we didn't. We only discussed this in terms of approving new library trustees or whatever, or that final Article 11. And so, I think, facing these hard questions is necessary. And I'm fine with a working group. I'd like a good understanding of, who the members are and exactly what their output product is. Is their output product a draft warrant article? Is their output product a list of responsibilities? What is the output product?
Great. Yeah, there's definitely more work to do before we'd actually have a proposal like that. But it's good to understand that the board would be open to, us coming back with some notion like that. Appreciate it. The other thing I heard Alyssa say that I wanted to highlight was that Fran also said, is that the Citizens Library is working right now. I mean, there's people showing up, there's events happening, there's staffing, so something's working. We share a goal of having that continue, that it's working, and that's good. Other final comments on this topic?
I just want to have the chance to ask a couple of questions that I think would be useful to have answers to. One was mentioned by Fran earlier. Can we continue to have one director reporting to 2 boards? What are the challenges of that? And can those be overcome? I think that's a critical question to answer. Can we continue to have Memorial Library staff cover shifts, vacations, sick time, lunch hour? Can we continue to rely on volunteers, the senior worker program? I came across some document where I think it was a town report, where the volunteers were covering lunch breaks for the sole librarian. I know that we're moving towards increased security for the people who are working in the library. So questions about whether or not it's okay to have one person working alone there or not, whether or not it's okay to have volunteers. Dean, I think you mentioned supervision. So I think that in the conversations, whether they happen with us or with the citizens trustees and the staff, memorial trustees, those questions need to be answered. And also the question about fiscal sustainability, whether or not it's feasible to to return to a more independent operation. Whatever the, legally acceptable governance structure is in place, who's responsible for what and who reports to who, whatever that is worked out. But the Concord two libraries, there's one board, one director, but there's also a library committee that's appointed by the select board. And interestingly, the committee is actually responsible for long-range planning and policies rather than the trustees. So that was a surprise to me. And speaking with one of the two Natick library directors, and this was the director of the smaller library, like Citizens, she told me that their two libraries have had for like 15, 20 years an informal arrangement where they're both part of Minuteman. And one library is charged, and then the smaller library pays 5% of that fee. It's based on circulation, so it's similar to the multi-party arrangement that we had with Minuteman. And, can that continue? I was told that was a new thing that was like a pilot for our libraries in Minuteman, but apparently it's been happening in Natick for a long time. The libraries on the Cape do the same thing, and the Natick librarian director told me that also some university systems operate that way too. So, some of the things that came out in the survey with different hours, like we want weekend hours, we want evening hours, we want to be able to have the ability to do interlibrary loans. Like, can those things be met, reverting back to a more independent operation if that's, what comes out in the shakeout?
And these are questions you'd like the trustees to wrestle with, or you'd like feedback from us, or that this would be part of the working group, or what's your vision of how those really interesting questions get wrestled with?
I just think that they need to be wrestled with. By whom, whether it's the trustees or the working group or us eventually.
So it sounds like if folks here have thoughts on that topic, they could contact you or contact the trustees or contact staff. I mean, anyway, not you, okay. Okay. Right, okay, staff. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you might have come in after we determined that this part of the conversation was just going to be among the board. But, I mean, everybody who's here, who's managed to, sit through this, has valuable input. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, but in some other forum, like drop us a note or talk with us, help us understand where we're going right and wrong. Thanks.
So we have received through the Citizens Library shell, going to the trustees, some comments, some emails. And this is something that has been discussed, I think, with both boards, having documents that are being discussed at these meetings available to the public, similar to the way they're in DocuShare for any other board and committee. So really the only thing that's available online are archived agendas and minutes. And I'm assuming that will be sorted out, but I also wanted to just take the opportunity to state my opinion that in the service of governmental transparency, I think that it's really critical for those documents to be available so that public who are attending the meeting can review them and also see what other people are sending in, right? Their thoughts and ideas, so that they can either agree or oppose with them.
Okay. We've opened up this topic in a good way, but looks like there's a final
Yeah,
comment.
the only thing I would say is because of the point that we can't send comments to Alyssa, it's, to me, critical that we have this on the agenda from time to time so that we can give feedback or, continue as part of the evolving process.
Absolutely.
Does it make sense for me to provide an update as liaison about progress?
That's part of it, and then we also want to actually have on the agenda a chance for discussion, so we can give feedback, but both would be great. Thanks, y'all. Not a particularly easy topic, but I felt like, as we were saying before, we'd never had this conversation before, and it's good to finally get it out in the open. Let's see, this is a select board meeting, we've got an agenda. Okay, there it is. One more thing. Approved letter of condolence and welcome to members of the Nashobah Praying Indians. This is, Alyssa, I'm going to hand this over to you in a minute. I just want to give a brief sort of start to this. I'm going to give a story. I just want to tell a story about what happened yesterday. After folks go. Yesterday at the Littleton Historic Society, we welcomed back Strong Bear Medicine of the Nashobah Praying Indian Tribe and 6 people in his family, and who had made contact with members of the Littleton Historic Society starting about 5 years ago. And the conversation has gone on in a lot of different directions. But one of them is that a house that's managed by the Littleton Historic Society is now being rented to Strong Bear Medicine and his family. And what that means is that almost 300 years after the last evidence of this tribe of Indians, was lost from recorded history, they're back. And they were able to tell us a lot of stories. They were able to tell us that, well, we were, taken to Deer Island, where some of us died. We were brought back to the community. We survived more than a lot of the other tribes because we were taken off to Deer Island much later than some of the other tribes, so we didn't have to go through the worst of the winter. But when we came back, we determined that the best thing for us to do was to disappear. So while keeping the knowledge going from generation to generation, they've lived in places all around the United States and in Massachusetts, but not being open at all about, their background. And the feeling in the last few years has been, it's time. It's time to come back together and be open. 3 years ago, they tried to have a powwow in Littleton, but, that was 3 years ago. The pandemic got in the way, but now they're coming back together again. So it was a very moving ceremony. And part of what hung over that ceremony was that they had recently, in April, lost their chief. So we wanted to find a way to both welcome them back to the area, to their original homes, and at the same time, we couldn't do that without acknowledging our condolences about the chief. So I think we can have Alyssa talk about it from here, but I think the main thing I wanted to say was that this is a, every few hundred year kind of occasion. So I'm not suggesting that we start writing, condolence letters to, prominent people in town, because I think that would take up too much of our time. But this did seem like a special occasion where a welcome letter was appropriate. Alyssa, you want to add something to that?
Sure. So this letter came about through my conversation with our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director, Wanjiko. She and I met to talk about the possibility of planning some events around Indigenous Peoples Day, as was planned last year and then was canceled. And she suggested that rather than focus on diving right back into starting up again with the planning, that we focus for the next year on some healing and reconciliation, because there was some misunderstanding between the town and the tribe over the plans for last year, which led to the cancellation. So one of her suggestions was, would it be appropriate for the town to send a letter of condolence? So I got in touch with a couple of people that are in friendship or relationship with Strong Bear Medicine. Dan Bodillion from the Littleton Historical Society is one. Bob Ferrara of Pine Hawk, Friends of Pine Hawk is another, because they have ongoing communication with Strong Bear Medicine. So it was their recommendation that a letter come from the board. So I drafted a letter, staff looked at it, made some comments, some changes were made, and just speaking to the comment that was made during resident concern, I concur with that and offer, instead of, we extend the warmest welcome to you. We share our excitement that you and your family have chosen to settle into your new Littleton home. Or your Littleton home, because, I mean, it's new for this generation, but it's not really new to the tribe. So, eager to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was kind of puzzled by the letter initially, and I understand the historical context of this, but I will certainly sign on to the letter. But I think, you know, we should be cautious about where we're going with this. I think, you know, there are lots of other people that have lost loved ones in this town, and if we start getting into the situation of making value judgments about who gets a condolence letter and who doesn't, I think that's a really slippery slope. So I would certainly caution folks on that. You know, certainly there's historical precedent about the Nashobah band. You know, it might seem somewhat irrelevant, but you know, at one point, all of this territory, once it was taken from the Nashobah Indians, was part of the British Crown. And we didn't write a letter of condolence when Elizabeth II died. That's sort of an absurd extension of this, but I think this is where you could go with it. So I don't have any problem with the letter the way it's been edited down, but I do hope you'll be really cautious about this. An example that I would use that you might want to think about if you're going to make a practice of this was a policy we established a few years ago to allow the raising of the Indian national flag. And there was a fairly specific policy that was set up, agreed to by the board at that time, certain criteria that had to be met. And I think that's served us well. Surprisingly, no other group that I'm aware of has asked permission to raise their national flag out front, although certainly we'd be welcome to that. I did have one person challenge me on it, and I said, well, send us a letter. You know, we'd be happy to comply with it so long as it meets the policy. So I think that's important from a policy point of view, that, you know, we're establishing precedents here, and I think we should make sure that we understand when these letters are going to be put together, and that we don't get into a situation, you know, one one ethnic group gets a letter of condolence and another ethnic group does not get a condolence letter. I think that's very important that the board shows some consistency with this.
David?
So I think this is a very nice gesture. The way you phrased it, Jim, you put things in a little bit other order, and I'm fine with the way the letter it's written with the edits that Alyssa introduced, but I think of this as acknowledging their return to their the ancestral Littleton area, and again, as you put it, the need for doing that at this time is also acknowledging the passing of the previous chief. And so I think you could even reverse the paragraphs, but I don't think I wouldn't introduce any edits. And that's why I think it's a very nice gesture. The whole thing is a very nice gesture, and I appreciate you guys, putting it together. Also, after the vote, I have one little related thing that I'd like to just ask the board. Not related to this letter, but after we take action.
Well, it sounds like we're ready for a motion to approve this letter. David?
I move to approve this letter with the edits that Alyssa introduced.
Second.
And Fran has seconded. Any last comments before we vote? Okay. All those in favor, please say yes or aye. Yes?
Aye.
I believe I heard yes or aye from everyone, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much. David, you had a follow-up you wanted to comment you wanted to make.
Yes, so we've talked about for a couple of years now, introducing and locally celebrating Indigenous Peoples' Day. And the first draft that we had of a proclamation declaring that day in Acton actually referenced the Nashobah tribe. And then it seemed to be the sense of the board at that time that maybe the Nashobah tribe wasn't appropriate and it would be better to reference the Massachusetts or the Wampanoag. I'm wondering what the board's thoughts are there. Do we mention all of them if we go forward with it again this year? Because I think sometime in the fall we'd want to, or maybe even next meeting, designate someone to draft something for us, but whether we would want it focused back on the Nashobah praying Indians, or whether leave it the way it was, or, towards the Massachusetts and Wampanoag, or all of them. So I just thought maybe we don't have to answer that question now, but I think it's an important, because we made the switch one way, and now we have folks that are back in the neighborhood. And I know you've been to the talks, and it was my thought in the original draft that they were appropriate, but again, there were differences of opinion. So I don't know if people have more opinions now, or we just want to schedule that for another time.
Well, time is of the essence here, and we had talked about bringing back a short Indigenous Peoples' Day proclamation, in September, given that that day is in October. Alyssa, do you have any thoughts about what mentions would be in that kind of note? And maybe other people want to give you feedback on that.
Yes, so I have drafted the proclamation, and it's much shorter than the one that was brought to the board last year, which was actually more of a resolution, and it called on many entities to take very many actions. This is just a proclamation similar to proclaiming, this year we proclaimed August 6th, 2023 India Day. So it's very similar to that, and I have circulated that to Dan Badillion and the town manager and Wanjiko, and I'm waiting to hear feedback from them before I share it with the board and get feedback from you. And there is a single mention of the Nashobah and no other tribe in the draft that I have so far. And now that I've referred to it, does it need to go in the meeting packet? Now that I've referred to the document, do I
Well,
need
it'll
to?
get mentioned as a document, but we'll actually put it in the packet when you have a draft.
Okay.
And we're ready to discuss it together. I'll add the comment, David, that It could have been, my vague memory is that it was me who had a concern about mentioning having the Nashobah be the lead band there. And I've been persuaded by, by research and by reading Dan Badillion's book and by meeting these folks that it's appropriate to have them in the lead now. So I'm not concerned about returning to that approach. By the board, and I see there's a resident who has something to say too. But first, any other comments from the board? Or no? Okay.
So I caution, depending on your background, which may not be visible, that people that are not of Indian descent not try and make decisions of what would be appropriate relative to deciding who should be in what lead. I would trust Alyssa and Jim to do this, to ask people from Nashobah and people that are around that are interested, just put the notice out, like a hearing notice. Hey, we're interested in kind of doing stuff. And is there people around here that would like to have input? As opposed to deciding what you think is right from a settler perspective. And that's all. I urge you to not, it's sort of like, let's learn about process in addition to learning about rights of people and land and whether we should declare, let's just start from scratch. Like, what would you do if this is your neighbor? Because they didn't believe in property rights. And so to be declaring things from a municipality that is already, in the sense, illegal in the ways of being of a people, to then use that authority to then, your position, to decide who should be named in what place. I feel like a more respectful way to say, we'd like to do something and we're not sure what, and see what people say. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we voted, right, already? Okay, good. It's reading David's screen, so watch out. We're going to start hearing his email. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the consent items. So why don't I read through these, and people can call out a hold if they want us to talk about them some more. Approve meeting minutes, July 24, August 8th, 2023. 9, approve executive session minutes, July 26, 2023. Approve the request for use of town roads, Ride for Live, September 17th, 2023. Authorize the following expenses from the Energy Efficiency Fund. $2,475.76 to reimburse additional cost for range replacements for Acton Housing Authority, and $12,100 for the Public Safety Facility Weatherization Project. Accept donation of $100 from Angela and Dominic Nania to be deposited in the Firefighter Gift Fund, number 315801. Accept donation of $100 from Terry Fitch to be deposited in the Police Gift Fund, number 3195. Approve a one-day alcoholic beverage license applications. Paulette Joyce at Narra Park Picnic Pavilion on September 16th, Solar on Earth at Narra Park Picnic Pavilion on September 11, and Danny's Place at Gardner Field, September 17, 2023. And then we flip the page. Number 15, approve license to use state-owned real property with the Department of Corrections, School Street Field, September 1st, 2023, August 30th, 2024.
I'd like to hold that,
Yes, David will
please.
hold that one. Appoint Zayd Dhasthageer as a full member to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee with a term to end on June 30th, 2026. And appoint Michelle Elix as a full at-large member to the Community Preservation Committee with a term to end on June 30th, 2026. First, let's see, what should we do first? Why don't we deal with David's concern about the Department of Corrections School Street Field item?
So I would just like to move to approve the license of state-owned use property with the Department of Corrections, School Street Field, September 1st, 2023 through August 31st, 2028. which is the corrected date from the document.
Thank
So
you.
basically, the last August 31st, 2028. So I move that.
Okay, is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? No? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, that's everybody. Now let's go back and look at all the rest. David?
I move to approve consent items 8 through 14 inclusive and 16 and 17.
Great, is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, Dean has seconded. Any further discussion about that? No. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, those are all approved. Okay, brief meeting evaluation. Let's see. What happened? Something fell. Oh, my phone fell. Oh, thank you. Okay, hopefully nothing bad happened. I felt slightly scattered tonight, but I thought it worked out okay. I thought the West Acton Citizens Library discussion had the right level of contention, like not too much, but enough so that we were open about understanding each other's differences. I apologize that the note about the letter of condolence came in so late. I'd been notified about that before, but then it zipped out my mind, so I wanted to get that in there. We've managed to end at a reasonable hour. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I thought we didn't have much of a real test of the Kulo, like little light thing, because everybody was very succinct as they spoke, but I was glad it was here. Any other thoughts and comments about how the meeting went? David?
Just that I appreciate the working session on the West Acton Citizens Library branch.
Great. Other thoughts? They could be about either how the meeting went or reminders of follow-up items that we need to take on or anything like that. Dean, Fran, Melissa. Okay. Thanks, everyone. One last motion?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, please say yes or aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. We're done. Thank you, everybody.